As we approach the 20th anniversary of September 11th, 2001, I thought I would share my experience as an airline crew member as to what we went through on that day. I woke up in the Crowne Plaza Hotel in Washington, D.C. to what is no doubt one of the best weather days I have ever experienced. My crew and I went out to Ronald Reagan Airport, planning to fly our passengers to Las Vegas. We pushed off the gate and started our taxi out to runway 1 when the ground controller announced, all aircraft going to New York Center airspace, pull off to the right. About 10 airplanes pulled over, and one pilot asked what was going on. The reply came from another pilot that an airplane had crashed into one of the World Trade Center buildings. I was headed west in my 757 with a pretty big fuel load and wanted to depart before traffic delays would no doubt begin to build. In front of me was an American MD-80 headed for DFW. They were cleared for takeoff, and I watched as their power came up, and then they pulled back on the power and told Washington Tower their company wanted them to return to the gate. He cleared the runway. Tower told us, Cactus 85, you are cleared for takeoff. We acknowledged and took off to the north, banking to the northwest to stay west of the east bank of the Potomac River and yet not overfly the Pentagon. I did not know I would be the last commercial flight to depart Reagan that day. Tower told us to contact departure control. It took a couple of calls to departure control before he answered, and when he did, it was with a quivering voice. Controllers' voices never quiver. We were climbing through 5,000 feet when an American 757 passed close by us in a descent going east, and he wasn't in the normal traffic flow. My first officer and I commented on it, but we figured he wasn't that close or our TCAS would have gone off. As we passed 10,000 feet, I asked Preston if he would listen to the ADF, which is an AM radio, and see what was going on in New York. He listened for about 15 seconds and told me both World Trade Center towers had been flown into by 767s. We came to the conclusion that this was not an accident and our country was under attack. A moment later, as Preston continued to monitor the ADF, he told me a bomb had just exploded at the Pentagon. I said, we just flew by the Pentagon. About 30 seconds after that, he said, no, they think an airplane just crashed into the Pentagon. Our initial thought was to get as far away from the East Coast as possible because bad things were happening. It never occurred to me that we could have been one of the target airplanes, and I am obviously glad we were not. As we leveled off at 35,000 feet, our company dispatcher called us on cell call and informed us the FAA was shutting down all U.S. airspace. He told us to divert either to Columbus or Indianapolis. I chose Indy because it was further west, and I would burn off just enough fuel so I would not have to make an overweight landing. We told our flight attendants and then made a PA to our passengers to let them know we would be landing in Indianapolis at least for a while. After landing, our lead flight attendant came up to the flight deck and reminded me we had 3 unaccompanied minors on our flight. I told her to make sure the city manager knew and let him figure out what to do for them. She came back a couple minutes later and told me that all 3 of these kids had uncles that lived in Indianapolis. I did not know this at the time I made my choice to land at Indy, but it is a testimony that the Lord was watching out for them that day. I thought of a scripture that is familiar to all of us, Psalm 121. I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. I did not know at the time it happened that the American 757 that passed us was the aircraft that hit the Pentagon. It wasn't until later that evening, when the timeline came out, that Preston and I figured out that it was. When I finally got to Phoenix on Thursday evening, Sherry had my first cell phone waiting for me. Mine is just one story of thousands that are told, but I thought I would share it with you. Thanks for listening.